Thunder began as a whisper that tasted like copper on Amara's tongue, as fluorescent lights hummed above the private clinic, and the rain-soaked city frothed outside. She pressed a hand to her belly, small and secret, where 3 faint flutterings brushed like moth wings against porcelain. Across the corridor's glass, Marco rehearsed a smile in the vending machine's reflection, a practiced curve that never reached his eyes. He had texted, not called, "We need to talk. Meet me at the clinic." Easier for him, she thought. There was always a crowd in hospitals, always a nurse passing with a clipboard to smother the sound of a heartbreaking. The doctor's earlier words still shimmered through her like sparklers. Elevated HCG, 3 sacks, early but clear. Congratulations, you will need rest and support. She had nodded, smiling into the paper gown, a small dawn lifting behind her ribs, and decided to wait to tell Marco until he finished whatever urgent business he claimed could not wait. Now he approached, cologne sharp and unfamiliar, wearing his suit like a verdict. "You look tired," he said gently, as if laying gauze over a blade. She smiled anyway, because she had always been the soft place for his edges. "I am," she said, "but it's a good." He cut the air with a folder thick as a hymn book. "I've filed," he said, and the syllables landed like stones. "I've filed. Divorce," inked in a font with no mercy. Dated this morning. Signed with a hand that used to draw hearts on steamed mirrors. Her mouth shaped his name, but released only air. He spoke quickly, as if speed might soften impact. They had grown apart, he said. Ambition needed air. He respected her too much to pretend. He did not say the other woman's name, though it pulsed behind his eyes like neon. Tatiana Vale, heiress with chandelier earrings, a promise of rooms where everything was soft and nothing was cheap. He spoke about opportunities, about a merger he could almost touch. He said, "I want no drama." Rain hammered the windows like a stadium crowd. A monitor beeped in a tiny, indifferent tempo. Amara studied the paper, then his mouth, then the place under his left eye where stress twitched when he lied. She remembered power outage nights when they ate mangoes by candlelight, sticky laughter gilding poverty. She remembered counting coins for rent, his head on her lap while she braided his weary thoughts into hope. She remembered the song they promised to grow old to. The hallway narrowed around them. The corridor clock clicked its small bones. At last she breathed. "Is this what you want?" she asked, careful as if handling glass. His jaw clenched, the compass of a coward pointing anywhere but true north. "It's what's best," he answered. Silence rose like a tide, enough to drown or deliver. In it, 3 heartbeats shivered inside her, steady as little drums preparing for a parade. A quiet, lawless grace uncoiled. She would not beg. She would not confess the triplets yet, would not hand him leverage like keys to a city, nor would she speak of the other news waiting in an unstamped London envelope, old money awakening with her name on its lips. "All right," she said. "You'll have what you came for." He blinked, unsteady for the first time. "You're not going to fight?" "I've learned the difference between losing a marriage and losing myself." He nodded, relieved, and turned away. The rain slackened. Somewhere, a newborn wailed, raw and royal. Amara folded the papers and slid them beside the brochure and the envelope. She pressed her palm to her belly and felt the gentle uprising within, a chorus rehearsing. She would carry silence like a lantern and let him walk into darkness. The papers would be signed, the rain would end, and her future would begin, multiplying quietly beneath. Storms don't always roar. Sometimes they arrive as quiet papers on a kitchen table, and Amara felt that soft thunder as she slid a butter knife under the wax seal and drew out her grandmother's will. The crest at the top, a crowned cocoa pod, glinted like a remembered hymn, and the language beneath was steady as a metronome. Philomena Osei Kwarteng, leaves to her granddaughter, Amara Nyarko Doyle. All remaining holdings, including accounts at Harrow and Trent, a Knightsbridge townhouse, the Osei Trust's minority stake in Vale International Logistics, and liquid assets not less than $100 million. She read it twice, then a third time, until the apartment seemed to grow a size larger, and the walls exhaled. Summers in Accra rose around her, the old woman's laugh, lessons about ships, cocoa, and daughters who stacked bricks where men expected flowers. She had kept this lineage quiet with Marco, wanting a love that didn't need scaffolding, but love had filed a petition that morning, so secrecy shed its skin and became strategy. She placed the will beside the divorce papers, pressed a hand to the small orchestral flutter in her belly, and felt 3 bright taps answer, counting her in. She dialed the number listed at the bottom. "Jenkins and Rook," said a voice. Amara confirmed passports, birth dates, and an appointment for Tuesday in London. "You may bring counsel," the woman offered. "I'll come alone," Amara replied, surprised by the steel in her own mouth. Across town, Marco stood under a chandelier in Vale International's lobby, while Tatiana edited an email. "Faster is cleaner," Tatiana murmured. "My father wants stability on paper before the board meets." Marco spoke of synergy, timing, and the virtue of decisive men. Champagne arrived and went warm. He did not know that the company polishing his reflection carried, deep in its ledgers, the initials of the grandmother he dismissed as provincial, nor that the inheritance he chased by proximity had already chosen the woman he had left. Back at the table, Amara read the annex. Charitable foundations, rental properties, a venture arm called the Silent Power Fund, designed to back women who refuse to wait for permission. One clause pressed like a palm between her shoulders: beneficiaries are advised to treat privacy as capital. Public revenge looked small. Private flourishing looked enormous. She opened her laptop and wrote to her obstetrician, "We need a prenatal plan for multiples. And to the firm, I accept and will attend Tuesday." A text from Marco arrived. "Hope you'll sign quickly. It's best for both." She saw the boy who had once counted coins with her on a mattress, the man who now counted rooms with someone else, and typed nothing. Instead, she opened a notebook, flipped past a list for lentils and bleach, and wrote 3 names she would carry in silence a little longer. On the next line she wrote, "Build a world they can inherit without apology." The intercom buzzed. A courier delivered a parcel addressed in Philomena's looping hand, posted days before the heart gave out. Inside lay a jade bracelet, cool as river shade, and a note, "Wear this when you must remember who you are." Amara slid it over her wrist and felt rightness click into place like a well-cut key. She tucked the divorce petition into a manila envelope, anchored it beneath the will as one might lay a shadow beneath a lamp. Inside, 3 small drummers kept time, and Amara understood that the next song would be written in her name, in their names, and in numbers that did not ask permission. Morning arrived like a verdict stamped in gold, and Amara met it with a suitcase, a passport, and a calm that felt earned rather than borrowed as she locked the apartment and let the lift carry her down through the building's spine. A car idled outside, courtesy of Jenkins and Rook, the driver polite enough to treat her silence as a passenger. At the airport, she moved through the ritual of metal trays and polite instructions, the jade bracelet cool against her wrist. The 3 lives inside her, thrumming like distant engines, as if they too understood the choreography of departure and arrival. On the plane, she pressed an orange to her lips to quiet the nausea and opened the folder the firm had couriered. Schedules, signatures, a summary that clarified what the will had already declared: she was not merely solvent, she was strategic capital, and one line unfurled like a banner across her mind. The Ose Trust holds preemptive rights and a silent option to convert preferred shares in Vale International Logistics to voting class upon any liquidity event precipitated by marital unions affecting executive leadership. She reread the clause until its architecture settled into place. Philomena had been many things: Coco, matriarch, patron saint of stubborn women, but above all, she had been a chess player. A marriage in the Vale dynasty could trigger a conversion, an old protection against nepotistic capture. which meant Tatiana's wedding to Marco would not only burn the last tatters of Amara's marriage, it would light a fuse that would land voting power in Amara's hands like a gavel. Clouds opened and closed like curtains beneath them. Amara let the seat back cradle her and thought of all the rooms where she had shrunk herself to fit, and how today those rooms would have to grow. In London, the air smelled of wet stone and possibility. A black cab carried her past plane trees to Knightsbridge, where the townhouse rose with the quiet authority of old money that does not need to announce itself. The housekeeper, Mrs. Abel, silver hair pinned with military precision, greeted her as if no time had passed, and carried her bag upstairs to a room lined with books and velvet chairs that remembered every conversation they had hosted. "Tea first, Mrs. Abel decreed, and brought ginger biscuits that settled the rebellion in Amara's stomach. Afterward, a car took her to Jenkins and Rook, where a meeting room waited with water, pens, and two partners whose expressions struck the balance between warmth and war readiness. Mr. Carter, no relation to any story that mattered, walked her through asset confirmations, trust mechanics, and the veil clause in exacting detail. Miss Anand asked about her health with the same seriousness she used for escrow. When they reached the conversion provision, the room tilted toward destiny. In plain terms, Miss Anand summarized, if Miss Vale marries your estranged husband, while this board realignment is underway, your Class B preferred becomes Class A voting, and you rise from minority to decisive, contingent upon the board's quorum. It was a safeguard your grandmother negotiated after the 1999 scare. Amara nodded, seeing Philomena's steady hand across decades. She asked about privacy, beneficiary shields, and how to act without spectacle. Quiet is stronger currency, Mr. Carter agreed, sliding a document forward. They laid out a plan. Notarize acceptances today. Lodge notices with Harrow and Trent. Inform the Vale Secretary of Records only of the Trust's updated contact agent, not the beneficiary's identity then. If provoked by a public filing or matrimonial notice, execute the conversion with simultaneous board summons. You may never need to use it, Miss Anand added, because the knowledge that you could is often sufficient leverage. Amara signed with the even script of a woman done apologizing for competence. She felt the triplets flutter, as if answering roll call. Afterward, she walked through the drizzle back to the townhouse, paused at a shop window where dresses dreamed on headless mannequins, and caught her reflection, tired, yes, but multiplied by resolve. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number bearing Tatiana's bright impatience. We're confirming dates. Marco says you'll sign quickly? Followed by a rose emoji that felt like a flag planted on someone else's land. Amara typed nothing, then composed a single reply to her attorneys instead. Proceed with agent registration and the board notice packet. Quiet channel only. She climbed the townhouse stairs, set a hand to her belly, and spoke into the dim evening not as a plea, but as a promise that fit her, like a tailored coat. We will build softly and strike only if necessary. Dawn in Knightsbridge lifted like a silk curtain, and Amara rose with it, steadying herself against the wardrobe as the triplets rolled like pebbles in a tide pool. Then dressed in a navy sheath that could hide a revolution, and took breakfast while Mrs. Abel briefed her on the townhouse's rhythms, fresh flowers on Wednesdays, the gardener on Fridays, and a study whose desk still smelled faintly of Philomena's sandalwood before a car carried her to street. Havers for the first London prenatal appointment. The sonographer's gel was a cold moon on warm skin, the monitor an ocean where 3 bright constellations pulsed, and when the woman smiled and said, "A choir? Not a solo." Amara let the sound join the private orchestra in her chest, then listened to instructions about protein, rest, and the shameless grace of asking for help, all of which she wrote down in a neat hand that had signed trusts yesterday, and wrote grocery lists with equal seriousness. Afterward, she walked through drizzle to Harrow and Trent, where she met a discreet private banker under a ceiling of coffered restraint, confirmed the trust's agent registration, arranged multi-signature protocols that treated her future like a vault, and opened a quiet account in her own name, under an old family alias, whispered through generations, as a reminder that women who built ships also built escape routes, then authorized modest disbursements for medical care, and aligned to seed the Silent Power Fund with its first independent bet, a Lagos femtech startup, building low-cost prenatal monitors, because if life was multiplying inside her, she would multiply safety for others too. By noon, the Vale Secretary of Records responded to Jenkins and Rook with a brief acknowledgement of the trust's updated agent details, a footnote in the ledger that read like a lit fuse, only to those who knew how filings hummed before they sang. And Amara let the email sit unopened on her screen while she planned the afternoon. A call with Miss Anand to finalize the board notice packet, a review of the townhouse security vendor who spoke in numbers rather than bravado, and a visit to the study where Philomena's dictionaries kept quiet guard. In the study, she found a ledger bound in green calfskin, lines of tidy columns recording ships, harvests, and lessons written like recipes. When men boast, ask for the documents. When they threaten, remind them of the bylaws. When they believe you small, use the inches to move unseen. And she felt the inheritance shift from noun to verb as her phone lit with news from another universe. A photo of Marco and Tatiana at a museum gala, captioned with a journalist's glittering shorthand about love, vision, and mergers of hearts and empires, followed by a text from Marco that tried for diplomacy and landed in condescension. Hope you're being reasonable about the timeline, which he answered with a single forwarded contact from Jenkins and Rook, labeled Service of Process. So, he could stop pretending the law was informal. Later, a junior reporter called to confirm rumors that the mysterious Osei Trust had resurfaced in London, and whether it would influence Vale's upcoming board realignment. But Amara declined, because silence was working harder than adjectives ever could. In the late afternoon, she returned to Street Havers for a nutrition workshop, learned the arithmetic of triplet pregnancies: more calories, more appointments, more rest, more honesty, and scheduled a consultation with a maternal fetal medicine specialist who treated competence like a kindness, then walked home through a city, rinsed clean by rain, and paused on the townhouse steps to feel 3 answering flutters, as if the children already understood that their mother was stocking the pantry of their lives with contracts, doctors, and rooms that would not ask them to shrink. Inside, she wrote a list titled, Before the Announcement, Doctor Clearance for Travel, Finalize Board Packet, Fireproof Files, Confirm Nursery Architect who knew how to hide safety and beauty, then turned a page and wrote another called, After the Wedding Exercise, the Conversion, Summon Quorum, Choose Directors who Valued Ethics over Parties, and watched both lists sit together, like bookends, around a chapter not yet written. While the jade bracelet cooled her wrist, the house settled into evening, and the future, polite and unstoppable, took its seat at her table. The rumor did not walk to her. It arrived dressed in string lights and lacquered smiles on the society page, announcing an engagement party at the Vale Glass House for Saturday, a prelude to a swift civil ceremony the following week. And Amara read it over mint tea, while the townhouse breathed steadily around her like an old animal that had learned her name, then closed the tab and opened the board notice packet one more time, tracing each clause the way a seamstress runs a finger along a hem before the show. She would not hasten or stall. She would keep time with the law. In the morning she met with Miss Anand, beneath a skylight the color of rinsed porcelain, signed the last quiet cover letters authorizing the agent to receive any matrimonial filings, and approved the courier schedule that would place sealed envelopes at precisely the right desks if the Vale Registry published a notice. Afterward, she walked to Street Havers, where a maternal fetal specialist measured her blood pressure and smiled at the chorus on the monitor, then spoke plainly about the arithmetic of safety: more rest, no flights after 24 weeks, iron like a religion, and the humility to cancel plans if the body demanded. Amara nodded, tucking prudence into her bag alongside power, because both would be needed. In the afternoon, she toured a nursery fabricator whose designs hid steel frameworks inside carved clouds. She ran a palm over a crib rail that looked like moonlight and paid the deposit from the alias account. A small domestic signature on a day written mostly in legal ink. At dusk, the city turned to gold leaf, and a message from Marco arrived with the half-cheer of a man auditioning for decency papers ready at the clerk. Sign tomorrow? And she answered with a time and a firm location at Jenkins and Rook, so the choreography would leave no room for improvisation. Night poured like velvet. She stood at the study window and watched a fox ghost along the railings, thought about hunger and grace sharing one small body, and promised her own to both nourish and restrain. Saturday brought sun bright as cymbals. Mrs. Abel left early for her granddaughter's recital, and the townhouse held its breath. By noon, social media glittered with the glasshouse's florals, orchids like white torches, a bandstand coiled in cables, Tatiana in a dress that could buy a minor province, Marco at her shoulder learning how to look like a vow. Amara muted the sound and studied the caption sources close to the family, accelerated timeline, board stability, and felt the old ledger's advice breathe beside her. When men boast, ask for the documents. The documents would come. She showered, braided her hair, and dressed in a simple black column, not for mourning but for clarity. Then took a car to the river and walked until her steps matched the water's metronome while the triplets kept time under her palm. Past a bridge, her phone chimed. Jenkins and Rook forwarding a scan from the Vale Registry, intention to marry filed for Tuesday. Civil ceremony at City Hall, 9 a.m. Signatures witnessed by a company officer. She stopped, let the wind comb through the moment, and replied with 2 words that turned the next page without noise. Proceed quietly. Back at the townhouse, she signed her own divorce papers in the presence of a notary, her pen steady, the lines clean, and did not include a single adjective about cause or complaint. She chose terms that protected her medical care, ensured privacy, and declined maintenance she did not need, then placed the packet in a leather folder embossed with initials that had belonged to Philomena and now belonged to the plural inside her. Tuesday arrived with the crisp certainty of legal paper, and London wore its pale sky like a seal, while Amara ate toast slowly, counted 3 steady kicks beneath her ribs, and let the townhouse clocks align with City Hall's hour. At 9, Marco and Tatiana signed before a registrar and a company officer who posed like a ribbon on a gift. And by 9:07, the record moved through channels older than both romance and ambition toward a ledger where consequences preferred to speak softly. At 9:30, in a conference room paneled with restraint, Jenkins and Rook confirmed the trigger, and Miss Anand slid a folder toward Amara, with the poise of a conductor lifting a baton. Conversion notice prepared, quorum summons drafted, courier at the curb. All that remained was a signature that understood the difference between noise and music. Amara signed. Across the city, the Vale glass tower adjusted its posture. Secretaries stood. Phones vibrated. A director who had flown in at dawn set down his cappuccino and rubbed a ring mark into the table while reading the clause the old matriarch had stitched into history like a silver thread. At 10:15, the boardroom filled with timed breathing and watch faces, and the secretary read the agenda without theatrics. Acknowledgement of matrimonial filing. Activation of 1,999 protective instrument. Conversion of OSE Trust preferred to voting class. Recalculation of seat weights. Motion to ratify the realignment slate. Tatiana arrived with the sheen of a recent vow and stopped when the math rearranged the room beneath her feet. Marco followed, carrying the smile of a man who believed architecture bowed to mirrors, and felt it falter as the secretary finished the tally that placed decisive vote in the trust, whose beneficiary did not appear, did not gloat, did not send a single adjective, only a proxy card, clean and precise. Debate bloomed and withered. Someone suggested postponement. The bylaws refused. Someone mentioned fairness. The ledger replied with dates and signatures that could not be charmed. When the vote rose, the trust's voice, quiet, documented, undeniable, joined two directors whose memory of the 1,999 scare outweighed cocktails and gossip, and the slate shifted by a hinge's breadth. Governance committee to a woman with a spine like good timber, audit to a quiet skeptic who liked numbers more than parties, strategy to an operator who asked what work was being done for the workers, and the proposed appointment of Marco to an executive vice chairmanship dissolved like sugar in hot water. At 11:20, the minutes settled. At 11:21, power did what it always does when it meets paper. It obeyed. Amara watched the updates arrive, one by one, like calm waves reaching a measured shore, then closed the laptop and placed both hands on the curve of her future, feeling the children answer as if the room inside her had learned to applaud. She did not celebrate with a headline or a public lesson. She took ginger tea in the study that smelled of sandalwood and wrote letters instead. One to the Silent Power Fund, expanding its first bet to prenatal care hubs across 3 cities. One to Mrs. Abel, increasing the household staff and nursery project timeline. One to her obstetrician, confirming appointments and rest days with the same seriousness she gave to boards. In the afternoon, when Marco texted, "What have you done?" she laid the phone face down, because explanations are a tax paid to doubt, and she was done paying. Evening arrived like a benediction. The city exhaled, the townhouse lights warmed, rain thought better of itself, and drifted away. Amara stepped onto the balcony and named the horizon after her grandmother, after the cocoa fields, after every ledger line that had taught her to ask for documents instead of promises. Beneath her palm, 3 hearts kept time triplets, rehearsing a future that would never need to shrink to fit inside anyone's idea of luck, and she understood the shape of victory she wanted. Not a spectacle, not a ruin, but a long, abundant table, where absence could no longer sit at the head. She went back inside and began to set it.